Okay, great. So thank you very much for agreeing to join today and let me interview on menopause, Alison. I've known Alison as a menopause expert for some time. So a bit about Alison. Alison is a writer, an author, podcast guest speaker, a teacher, with more than 30 years experience in the health and wellness sector. She's a registered nutritional therapist and aesthetician. She teaches nutrition at a beauty school. She's renowned for her focus on women's health, specializing in those 40 plus, perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. Alison operates a thriving online clinic assisting women globally in navigating menopause. She offers tailored dietary, health, and lifestyle modifications to rejuvenate confidence and vitality. And Alison's also the pioneering force behind the acclaimed menopause 5-step breakthrough pathway, helping midlife women reclaim their well-being. So I want to first ask you what it is that led you in the first place to specialize in women's health and menopause and perimenopause.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It's lovely to be here today and talking to you all. Yeah, what led me into this? Well, really very short because it's quite a long journey. But when I was a teenager, I had very bad acne. You know, the hormonal acne, which is terrible when you're a teenager. So that really triggered my interest in hormones at a very young age because I wanted to find out what was going on. I didn't just want to take medication. So with that and changing what my lifestyle and my eating habits, even as a teenager, I saw a huge difference in my skin. And that led me to train to be an esthetician, so a beauty therapist. And when I was working as an esthetician, I was specializing in hormonal skin health. So, you know, women that had problems with their skin due to hormones. And, you know, there was probably about 80–90% of the women that I saw were in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And they felt terrible. They felt neglected. No one was caring for them. And this really triggered my interest in hormones in this area. So then I very soon came to realize that, you know, you can treat the skin with aesthetic treatments and products, but you also need the inside piece. You know, you have to think about what you're eating. So that's when I went back and studied nutrition at university. And ever since then, I've been focusing on menopausal women's health because it is an area as well that I saw when I was growing up. My mother, you know, all the women around me were really suffering and nobody spoke about it. It was kind of like, oh, no, you don't just talk about that. You're going through the change, you know, just get on with it. So I've kind of made it my mission to talk about it, understand it, and really help women and support them through this time in their life.
So what kind of things is it that normally brings someone to see you? Like what issues or concerns?
Yes, I mean that there's a huge range of different symptoms. Majority of women, by the time they come to see me, they're just exhausted, overwhelmed, you know, suffering. They maybe don't. It's quite common that they don't actually think that they're in perimenopause or menopause. They just feel that something is happening. They feel terrible. But things like just unexplained weight gain, anxiety, just not feeling like yourself, really just feeling anxious. Hot flashes obviously is a very common symptom of menopause. Cognitive decline, you know, brain fog, not being able to focus on things, and just generally feeling terrible.
So a lot of these symptoms have overlap with other possible causes. So is it tricky to figure out what's coming from menopause and what's maybe coming from other causes like the thyroid or something?
Yeah, that's a big one, the thyroid. I mean, if we look at perimenopause, that starts average, on average, it's very individual at the age of 45. And, you know, and if you're a woman that's 45 plus, but between 45 and 50, and you're having hot flashes and you may be feeling exhausted, you've maybe gained a little bit of weight around the tummy area, you're being anxious, it's most likely that you are in perimenopause. But there are other conditions just as you said, Christa, like thyroid conditions that have very similar symptoms to menopause. And also things like, if you're really stressed for whatever reason, this can be seen as, certain menopausal symptoms. Depression, if you're really low and maybe even suffering from depression, that some of the symptoms are very similar. So yeah, that there is an overlap. But hot flashes, really, that there are other conditions where you have that, but it's one of the real telltale signs that you are actually in perimenopause.
So would you say, is menopause and perimenopause all about hormonal changes and their effects on the body?
Yeah, I mean, that is the main thing, isn't it? Because it's a big hormonal event in a woman's life. So when we have a decline in estrogen and progesterone, we see these things happening in the body. But also, we can't forget that there is an aging process going on here. We can't blame everything on the menopause. The natural aging process comes with certain things that happen, with our metabolism, with our skin, with our cognitive health. So it's kind of like a combination of those two things. But menopause is to do with the decline in estrogen and progesterone. And the effect, the knock-on effects that has on the body, which is quite large. We need these hormones to live a healthy life.
Do you see when people are coming to you, it's all these perimenopause symptoms or menopause, are there other conditions that you commonly see that the women are starting to suffer at the same time? And I'm wondering if there is, what are the most common?
Yeah, I mean, chronic health problems, they happen as we age, possibly. But because of estrogen decline in estrogen, you're at higher risk of, for example, getting osteoporosis, cardiovascular events, your bone health. We lose bone mass as we age, but we also, when we have a decline in these hormones, we lose bone mass. So you're more at risk of osteoporosis. And there's research. I mean, we need to do more research, but that there maybe is a connection between menopause, estrogen decline, and dementia. So there's a bit of a question mark there, but the things that I see in my clients are metabolic changes, insulin resistance, diabetes 2, higher cholesterol levels, cardiovascular. These sort of things can really increase, and also skin conditions. All of a sudden you can get eczema or psoriasis. And then, thyroid, like Hashimoto's. So there is an increase in these autoimmune diseases, absolutely, as we come into this stage of our life.
Is there some way we can prepare ourselves that you recommend to have like a smoother journey into menopause?
Yeah, preparation. That's a good question. I mean, the answer is yes, there is. And when you look at research, there is actually research to back up that if you come into perimenopause in a good, healthy state, then you are less likely to suffer from, the menopausal symptoms as severely. And what does that mean? It means, making sure that you've got a balanced body weight. It's been shown that if you are carrying extra weight, you may suffer from symptoms more severely, like hot flashes, anxiety, cognitive issues. So keeping a healthy weight is really important. And, looking after yourself. I know that sounds quite vague, but you really need to think, okay, I'm coming into this phase of my life. I need to pay more attention to what I'm eating, my lifestyle. Because if you go into the transition in a healthier state, you are less likely or more likely to go through it, easier than you would, you know, if you go in not feeling as good or not as healthy.
Mm. And are there any particular nutritional factors that you think we should really pay attention to when we're going into menopause or perimenopause?
Yeah, I mean, nutrition, that's a huge
Yeah,
question.
of course.
But
Sorry.
what we want to think about is, you know, eating in balance.
Mm,
And one key thing that as women we don't tend to eat enough of is protein. And when we age as women and we come into menopause, we need protein because we actually lose muscle mass. Again, that's part of the aging process and menopause. And we really want to keep our muscles because, I mean, muscles are so important for everything, including our metabolism and our metabolic health. So eating protein is key. What I say is roughly around a palm size of protein with every meal. And, you know, what protein, what does that mean? You know, it's things like meat, eggs, fish, you know, nuts and seeds if you don't eat meat, dairy, you know, really good quality sources of protein. And then we need fats. You know, healthy fats are crucial for hormonal balance and hormonal production, and also skin health, hair health. You know, fat is so important. Omega-3 fatty acids, things like fatty fish, you know, mackerel, salmon, herring, all of those wonderful fish. If you don't eat animal products, you can get that from algae, omega-3. And then, you know, olive oil, brilliant. It's so beneficial, olive oil. And there was something I was actually reading yesterday that it said even just, I think it was Dr. Hyman said a teaspoonful of olive oil a day had huge health benefits. So it's not even that you have to eat a lot of it.
mm,
So healthy fats, and then carbohydrates. And I know carbohydrates, a lot of people are very opinionated about, you know, carbohydrates, but what you see with research and what I've seen with my clients is when we come into menopause, that reducing, I'm not saying you need to go carbohydrate free, but thinking about the carbohydrates you eat and maybe just reducing them a little bit. So really balancing your plate more with protein, with healthy fats and whole grain carbohydrates and vegetables, because vegetables are actually a carbohydrate. People don't necessarily always think of that. You know, so really cutting down on what I call the white carbohydrates, you know, the refined carbohydrates like white bread, white pasta, white rice, because we don't actually need that amount of energy. You can get sufficient nutrients and energy from eating good source of protein, lots of vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and everything. Another key thing with nutrition is avoiding stimulants, because these can make your menopausal symptoms worse. So things like, I know people love coffee, but coffee can actually make your menopausal symptoms worse. So, you know, if you can, try decaf, or if you do drink coffee, really try to drink it in the morning rather than after midday, because it can really interfere with your sleep. And alcohol. Unfortunately, alcohol is not the friend of a menopausal woman, and we can't. There's actually reason behind this, because your body can't metabolize alcohol like you did when you were younger. Because I know myself and many of my friends that, you know, in menopause, I just can't drink anymore. I just don't bother because of the way it makes me feel. Even after one glass of wine, you know, you just feel terrible. It affects your sleep. You wake up early. You feel like you've got a hangover. So I reduce or be mindful of your alcohol intake, and really avoiding ultra processed foods, you know, cooking from scratch. It doesn't have to be complicated, but, you know, using whole food ingredients, because these ultra processed foods have so much sugar and chemicals and everything in them that don't really nourish the body. We want to really go back to basics and eat whole foods.
Yeah, and there've been studies coming out quite recently really highlighting the connection between eating more ultra-processed foods and a lot of chronic diseases. And with the coffee, I'm wondering probably we need to get the right balance because caffeine can be helpful for the brain against cognitive decline, maybe ADHD. But it's not like the more the better. We need to figure out, if you've got too much menopause symptoms, you may want to cut down a little bit. But you may want to have some.
Yeah.
So I guess we've all got to hit our right balance.
Yeah, you're really right, Chris. Coffee, there's a lot of evidence, isn't there, on the benefits of coffee. So yeah, it's just finding that happy medium, really, isn't there, that works for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly. Mm. And when it comes to lifestyle factors, are there any particular lifestyle factors that you think are important that we pay attention to make sure we get them optimized when we're going into menopause?
Yeah, I think key with lifestyle is you just need to start looking after yourself, because if you're feeling terrible, we always say, oh, we kind of come at the bottom of the list, don't we? My self-care, I have to look after everybody else, have to work, have to look after my family. You tend to come at the bottom of the list, but you really need to prioritize daily doing something for yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes. But things that, in particular, when we come into this phase of life, we want to keep strong. We want to keep our muscle mass and we want to keep our bones strong. So doing weight-bearing activities is really important to keep
Mm.
yourself fit and healthy for the rest of your life. So lifting things, you don't have to go and spend hours at the gym if that's not your thing, but just lifting weights to keep your muscles and bones strong. I actually have by my kettle, I drink a lot of tea. I have some dumbbells by my
Mm.
kettle. So I've made it a habit that every time I put the kettle on, which is quite a lot in the day,
Yeah.
I get my dumbbells and I just lift them while the kettle's
Mhm.
boiling. And
Yeah.
if you do that a few times a day, every day, it has a huge effect.
Yeah. That's brilliant. I have a similar thing that I actually have forgotten to do it recently. I'm a coffee person. Um, but when the coffee is, the coffee machine takes a little while to do 10 squats, like where you squat and jump up, and they are intensive. And it doesn't take much time, but it's intense. And with the weights too, I've had hand weights since I was 14 years old. It takes me to go through my entire routine 4 minutes, but it's good. 20 reps of all these different things. Like ish in a very short time, you can do a lot of strength with some dumbbells or doing some squats or push-ups or whatever you want to do.
It's so
Yeah,
simple, isn't it? So
it
simple.
is.
And if you
Mm,
do it daily, if you attach it onto another habit, then you remember to do it. So I
yeah.
find that really helpful. But lifting
Mm,
things is key. And then
mm,
another like huge area which you could do like a whole webinar on is stress management. Now,
mm,
stress, when we come into stress in general is detrimental for health, chronic stress. But when we come into menopause, because of all the hormonal changes, that stress has more of an impact because of the cortisol, the stress hormone release. We're more likely when we come into menopause to suffer from insulin resistance, like blood sugar balance can be hard or harder. And when we have cortisol in our system, we're chronically stressed, your body actually releases glucose into the system. So again, you've got these high blood sugar levels. So that's one key area really to manage stress. And it's finding your thing, isn't it, that works for you to manage stress. I'm a huge fan of deep breathing, something as simple as just breathing. I mean, you must know, Chris, with your yoga. I mean, you're a
mm.
fantastic yoga teacher. I mean, that's just amazing, isn't it, for stress?
Yeah, I often give people, I've got some yogic breathing exercises given out that I give to clients often as their guidance. Some people are into meditation, some people are like, no, 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 I can't do meditation. Breathing, I think everybody can do.
Mm.
And it can be very effective. So.
Yeah, it
I
really
totally
helps
agree on that.
reset. Another key area with menopause is sleep. That
Yes.
can be really difficult. I know myself, it's actually got better now, but I was just waking up at 2 o'clock every morning, just lying there. And, if you don't sleep, you feel terrible. And it just has a knock-on effect on everything else if you're not sleeping. But looking at your sleep hygiene, going back to avoiding stimulants before you go to bed. I know it's difficult because we all spend a lot of time on our mobile devices, but really kind of switching off a couple of hours before you go to bed, not doing things that stimulate you, that actually has a huge, I think that's one of the things that really helped me the most, was really kind of shutting down computers, phones and everything a couple of hours before I went to bed. Not like lying in bed looking at Instagram or anything. It's terrible.
Oh, it's the worst. I've had to work really hard on my sleep. I've had years of like insomnia, and I need to, if I'm looking, say, 5 minutes at my screen, I can tell the difference that it makes it hard to sleep. I need to end with lights down, preferably yoga, preferably a cup of chamomile tea, some magnesium, and not being drawn to my phone. I don't always succeed. There are nights I stay up working on the computer and then I'm on the phone and it, it messes me up. But I know what I need to do and it can make a big, big difference.
Yeah,
You're
magnesium.
right.
That is I'd actually think magnesium glycinate is very helpful. Uh,
Mm. Yeah.
it just calms everything down, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's my go-to as well. I was wondering, do you do much hormone testing?
Yeah, but when I work with clients, it's very individual, so it's very much depends on the client. But yeah, I do something called the Dutch test, um, specifically looking at hormones, because it can be very helpful. Because it gives you kind of this snapshot of hormone levels, um, and it can help you tailor plans to the client. But I think that for me, it depends on where the client kind of is in their menopause transition. If it's a lady that is in postmenopause, maybe 65 plus, 60 plus, then and not having menstruation, which would be very unlikely at that age, then you really kind of know that estrogen and progesterone are, and I mean, if you're taking hormone replacement therapy, then obviously that's a different issue because your levels will be higher. So I don't necessarily see the benefits of doing it on clients that are in postmenopause, but certainly in perimenopause, because not only does it give you a view of what the hormones are doing, but it gives you the understanding of how those hormones are being metabolized, because that can be a key issue, how your hormonal or detoxification pathways are working to get rid of these hormones, because we need to be able to detoxify them. And a lot of women in perimenopause can have estrogen dominance, which means estrogen levels are a lot higher. So that it can be useful, but it very much depends on the client and where they're at and the approach that they want to take.
Do you find because at perimenopause, the hormones are kind of can really be up and down from one month to
Mm.
another, that, a Dutch test that if you would do it one time, it would be very different to another? Or is it like your metabolism and your ratios, you think anyway, helpful to know if someone's got estrogen dominance, they're producing too much of the toxic, damaging forms that you will see that anyway?
Yeah, exactly, because it's
Mm.
your hormones can be all over the place in perimenopause. So even when you do a Dutch test, they recommend that you do it on like day 19, 20, um 21, those days in your menstrual cycle. But when you're in perimenopause, your menstrual cycle can be all over the place. I mean, you can maybe have one period and then not have a period for 2-3 months. So the information that you get from a Dutch test it's very, very useful to see how your body's metabolizing these hormones, especially if you're estrogen dominant. That's like really crucial, because there's a lot of things, nutrition, that you can add in to benefit these pathways.
Mm. Yeah. So for everyone, probably few people would know a Dutch test. It's a dried urine hormone test, and it really, if you want more, compared to just measuring hormones in the blood, you really see the breakdown products. If you're making more estrogens, are going down a more carcinogenic pathway. In the complete test, you can look at also the sleep hormones. You look at your cortisol, your stress hormone through the day. And it's like, if you want a really advanced test, it's this Dutch test that we're talking about. Yeah.
It's very,
So,
you get a lot of very good information, like you were saying, on
mm,
cortisol and DHEA and all of those different hormones. So it's very informative.
yeah, yeah. And it's easy to do because it's just a urine test, no blood or anything. You can just do it
Exactly.
at home. Yeah. Is there any other testing that you find is helpful to support women?
Yeah, I mean, thyroid testing, because thyroid testing or thyroid hormones can, I see that quite a lot in ladies when we come into menopause, that the thyroid can start. Thyroid is a gland that sits here, and it's kind of like the engine of the body, and we need our thyroid hormones. So doing thyroid testing, if I feel that maybe is necessary, cortisol. Testing. What else do I do? Yeah, I mean the gut. A lot of ladies start getting symptoms like digestive symptoms, or maybe bloating, constipation. IBS increases actually as women
Mhm.
get older and have a decline in hormones. So I'm a big fan of stool testing. Um, Again, the information that you get from that can be really, really useful. Um,
Mm.
I sometimes do genetic testing with clients, depending on the client, to see if there's any SNPs, mutations in genes. Um, and then things like lipid panels, things, the cholesterol levels, those sort of things. Um, so that there's many different, it's very much tailored towards what the client actually, their goals and
Yeah.
how they're feeling and everything. But yeah, I
Mm.
do think, testing can be fantastic because it's there in black and white. You can actually see,
Mm.
what's going on. And then I mean, I don't do this test, but the DEXA scan, which is to give you, it tests your bone density. If you feel that you're a risk of osteoporosis, or you maybe had a fall, and you've, because you sometimes, if you've got weaker bones or more porous bones, you can even just get a fracture when you fall over. And the
Mm.
DEXA scan, that's something you would go to your doctor to do, but it gives you your bone density basically.
Mm. Do you see many women with very early menopause, like say under 45?
Yeah, I mean, not many, I wouldn't say, but I have had clients that have early menopause, and it's actually more common than we think. I think it's 1% of women under 40 are affected by early menopause. And I mean, there's something called primary ovarian insufficiency, and this is really where your ovaries stop functioning. This can happen in women as young as 20, 25, which obviously can be like terribly traumatic. um if you go
Mm.
into menopause under the age of 40, you need to go and see a doctor, because that that is too young. There are women that start having the perimenopausal symptoms before the age of 45, kind of between 40 and 45. But if you've actually, you're not menstruating anymore at a younger age, then, you need to go and get that looked at and investigated.
Mm. Do you think it's more genetic if someone has early menopause, or do you think it's more lifestyle?
I think it's actually both come into play there, really. Um, Genetics, they can predispose someone to an early menopause, but your lifestyle factors also have an effect. Research shows that if, for example, if you're a smoker, if you drink heavily, if you're suffering from chronic stress and all these
Mm.
things, this can often lead to having an earlier menopause.
How would you distinguish if someone had amenorrhea, like had absent periods for some reason, or if they had menopause, they're going into menopause? How might you know, or can you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think because if you think perimenopause is on average 45 to 51,
Mm,
menopause is 51. So, if someone is coming up to 51 and they're not having periods, but they're worried that, it's not menopause, then I would get them to go and see a doctor. But the likelihood when you're at that age as a woman, if your periods are irregular, it means you're in perimenopause. If you're not having periods at all before the age of 45, then there probably is something else coming into play there.
mm, mm. Um, I'll ask you this question. This is a personal question because after I had twins when I was maybe 39, and so I was pregnant 9 months. And then I breastfed them for a bit over a year. So no period then. That's quite normal. But then my period didn't come back. With my first child, it took a year to come back or a bit more. So I wasn't expecting it to come back quickly. But then I think another 4.5 years passed. And I was like, well, over 40, 42 or something. And I thought, am I just going to roll into menopause? And never get perimenopause symptoms, just never have a period again and never go through this menopause thing. Um, do you think it would be possible? But what happened? I did get my period back at age 42. I simply stopped running for 3 months because I had a surgery on my leg and I wasn't allowed to run. And I know that from the past, running is a stress on my body that can tell me to stop having menstrual cycles. So yeah, 3 months without, and after many, many 7 years in total, it was with no period, including the pregnancy, my period came back. So it's like, all right, so I'm not in menopause. But I mean, do you think it could be you might could you just go straight from, hey, have amenorrhea and then you get old and then never have a period again? Would you expect the person to not get symptoms or
I, I don't really think that. I mean, if you think what you were describing, I think it sounds like you said, Christa, that it was to do with the fact you were probably exerting yourself too much, because that
mm,
can cause the stopping of periods, can't it? Um,
mm,
but if you've got somebody before they're going into menopause that isn't having menstruation, that for whatever reason that isn't going to have an effect on that you're going to go into menopause and your estrogen and progesterone levels are going to decline. So
mm,
in answer to your question, I would say that you most likely will still have menopause and maybe menopausal symptoms,
mm,
because that's just a natural bodily process, isn't it? But it
mm.
obviously depends on why you haven't had periods before you go into menopause.
Yeah.
um, but
I guess hormone levels were low. I did get one test. I did have low estrogen and progesterone, but it's probably not the same as a menopause, a woman's low estrogen and progesterone. Maybe my other hormones was different. I don't know. But anyway, I came out. I started cycling again. So it's like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
it's interesting with exercise, though, isn't it? You must be quite
Mhm.
sensitive to activity, because very
Yeah.
low body weight as well can cause your periods to stop.
Mm.
And
And that was
excessive
not the
exercise.
case for me. But it was not just exercise, it was running. It's happened to me previously when I didn't have periods, or they were irregular. When I swapped running for swimming, I would do swimming, spinning, working out at the gym. I'd be training every day, just not running. That's when I, for the first time in my entire life, got a 28-day cycle. Previously, it was like every 6 weeks. Maybe I'd skip it, maybe it'd be very regular and very long, drawn out cycles all my life. I started running when I was 14 and I got my first period when I was 14. I never had a 28-day cycle. The only time I ever do is when I'm not running a lot. So the run is like, compared to say swimming or other exercise, signaling to my body, this is not a time to reproduce. This is a
Yeah,
stress.
exactly. You've got, yeah. Your body's a very clever
Mm.
thing. It understands that you stop running. If you're going to get pregnant, you have to stop running because this is too stressful. That's that's
Mm.
the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, we've got lots of endocrine disruptors around us these days. Um, do you think this impacts menopause transition?
Yes, I do. And I really do talk about this a lot because the environment that we live in now, our modern world and society, we have so many things that disrupt our endocrine system. So, our hormone balance, our hormone production. And this certainly has an effect, not just on menopause, but I think in women in general, we're seeing this, aren't we, with our estrogen and levels and everything. So yeah, the main things that you really want to think about with endocrine disruptors is plastic.
Mm,
Um, what I try to get my clients to do is, I'm not saying you need to completely overhaul your kitchen, but gradually just change anything that you store food in that's plastic, change it to
mm,
glass or steel. Don't have plastic containers in the fridge, and absolutely do not warm things up in the microwave in plastic.
mm,
What happens is it's called BPA. This actually is a chemical that seeps into food, and it gets even worse if you heat it up. And it is an endocrine disruptor. It has an effect on estrogen, progesterone levels, and your endocrine system. And then, things like pesticides, herbicides, all the things like products, beauty products, skincare products, deodorants. Unfortunately, we can't avoid everything, but we can actively make a decision to try to reduce what
mm,
we use. Cleaning products in the house.
mm,
There's actually a lot of you see for sale now, like more of these natural cleaning products that don't contain the endocrine disruptors. So,
yeah.
if you can just gradually try to make an effort to incorporate these things into your lifestyle, because they do have an effect on our hormones, and they can have an effect on how you go through the menopause transition.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I make my own deodorant and I use natural oils for moisturizers. And actually, a colleague of mine, when she was a student, did a test. She had very dry skin and used a lot of body butters. And she did like a test that found she had a lot of like, I guess, plasticizers in her body from all the creams that she was taking. And she had breast cancer. That's why I think she was doing all the testing. So she stopped using all these skin products because the skin's sucking it all up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you think there are any types of women who tend to experience a rougher menopause transition, with worse symptoms? And types could be like, oh, ones who have this kind of problem or that kind of problem, but are there any patterns?
Um, yeah, I mean, it goes back to your question before, really. If you're carrying more weight, that is, I do see that, and it's also in research that you are more likely to experience more severe menopausal symptoms. If you have a history of PMS,
Mm,
that again can it's not like definite. If you have PMS, you're going to have a terrible menopause. That isn't what I'm saying. But
mm,
it's seen that women that have suffered from a lot of premenstrual tension, or that they and had a lot of kind of hormonal balances, that they may experience the menopause transition worse.
mm. How about women with PCOS or endometriosis? Do they, do you find that they tend to suffer more with perimenopause?
Yeah, I mean, both of those. If we look at PCOS, that both of them actually, when we are in perimenopause, when things are all a bit all over the place and you can have estrogen dominance, it can make the symptoms worse, not only of menopause, but of the PCOS, because of the higher levels in hormones. But hopefully, when you come into menopause, so when you're in postmenopause, when you've gone through the stage and you're not menstruating anymore and you've got lower levels of these hormones, it's been seen that you can experience fewer symptoms. But it's very individual, very individual. And it's quite interesting actually that PCOS women tend to go through menopause slightly later. So that the years, I think it's around about 2 years later than, women that don't have it.
Okay. I wonder if it's like for the fa more failed ovulations, greater egg
Yeah.
reserve, or
Yeah, I don't think we fully understand why that is, but there's a
mm,
lot of evidence that shows that women with that do tend to have a slightly later menopause than,
okay.
women that don't.
So aside from PCOS, are there other factors that might influence if a woman is having a earlier or later menopause?
No, I mean, like we spoke, I think genetics.
Mm,
You could look. There isn't so much evidence, but if you hear a lot of the time say, "Oh, my mother, she just glided through menopause and didn't have any symptoms," and you talk to the daughter and they're the same. So I think there is a small kind
mm,
of genetic factor going in there, and then how your health is, how your baseline health is, does have absolutely an effect on how you will experience menopause.
mm. Do you know do women who get a later first period get later menopause or the other way around, or does it age? Because some girls these days are sometimes getting period at 10, 11, 12. But then others will get a late period at like 14. I think a long time ago in history, we had our first periods more like the age of 14 or something. Um, do you know if there's a relationship there with the age of
Nothing
menopause?
that's really, no, not yet. But what's interesting with the menopause as well, it depends where you live in the world. When I say age 51 for menopause, 45, that is, within Europe. But in different countries in the world, certain cultures have a later or earlier menopause. So it is very different depending on where you live and, your culture and your lifestyle. So there's many different factors that come into play there as well, depending on what part of the world you're in. But as
Do
far
you
as
think they're mainly genetic factors or lifestyle factors?
I think it's a combination of both.
Mm, hmm
But if you think like, certain cultures where not in the Western world, where maybe, we eat a lot of processed foods and maybe we're stressed and, all of that piece, that they tend to not have as severe menopausal symptoms. Because in some cultures in the world, menopause is actually looked up to. It's looked upon as, you're this woman that's gone through something amazing. You're very wise. They become leaders of the village. So it's kind of celebrated. These women do not experience the symptoms of menopause like we do in the Western world.
hmm
But it's all kind of shrouded with negativity here, isn't it?
Mm. Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask is are there differences between women who've had children and women who don't have children in terms of menopause?
Not not really. I think again it's just so individual. There isn't really anything to say that you will experience it later or earlier or have more severe symptoms. No, not nothing that we know at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And how about if women who've taken the contraceptive pill for long periods in their life, does this affect anything to do with the menopause?
I mean, if you because obviously in perimenopause you can still become pregnant. So if you're
Mm,
taking contraception during perimenopause, that will have an effect on your hormone levels.
mm,
If you're taking that, so that can absolutely have an effect. But if you've been using the contraceptive pill and then you stop taking it for whatever reason, your body takes a while to kind of rebalance and get back its normal ovulation. But when you come into menopause, it shouldn't have an effect on your hormone levels, because I mean menopause is where your ovary function finishes. It's your ovaries stop ovulating. Um, but in the perimenopausal window, if you're still taking the contraceptive pill, then that can have an effect.
Do you think it's normally a positive effect or a negative effect?
I think it's very individual. It depends, because a lot of the time when people take obviously for contraception, but some people take the contraceptive pill for other reasons, don't they? For PMS, or they've got other factors, hormonal factors that they take it for. So I think it's very individual. But you really, what I would suggest is if you think that you're in perimenopause and you're having all these symptoms and you're taking the contraceptive pill, I would talk to your doctor just to get, that is really a good place to do a hormonal test, really, to see what's going on.
So, like we know often women gain weight around menopause. So how does menopause affect the metabolism?
Yeah, weight gain, that's probably one of the big things that I get asked the most about the menopause transition. Estrogen, as we've already said, is a key hormone. It isn't just for reproduction, it's needed for our metabolic health. And when we have a decline in estrogen and progesterone, and we haven't even spoken about testosterone, but let's just keep it to estrogen at the moment, because we tend to change shape. So we go from a pear shape to more of an apple. You gradually find that your weight accumulates, not for everybody, but it accumulates around the tummy area. And the factors, the reasons for this, so there's many different reasons. One of them can be due to insulin. Now, insulin is a hormone that we need to regulate our blood sugar. So when we eat refined carbohydrates, insulin enables our body to utilize that glucose energy. But when we come into menopause, we're at a higher risk of insulin resistance. And this is kind of where your body doesn't respond to this hormone, and it can cause higher blood sugar levels. And then when you've got high blood sugar levels, you store it as fat. It comes around the tummy area. And this is a really common symptom in menopausal symptoms around the stomach area. And also another reason why we have metabolic changes is that we lose muscle mass. We need muscles for our metabolic health. And also, we said before that you can't blame everything on menopause, because the aging process, our metabolism naturally slows down as we age, and we do become, more sedentary. We're not as active. We're sitting more. We're maybe not doing as much movement or exercise, and this all kind of adds up to increased body fat. And another fascinating thing is that your body's very clever. And when you're actually in menopause, your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, will produce a very small amount of estrogen, progesterone. And your body, you need these hormones. So your body utilizes them. But your body is also very aware of that. It's like, oh, hold on a minute. We haven't got enough estrogen here. We're going to store this because we need to keep hold of it. And where does it store it? Around the tummy area. So a lot of that fat around your tummy area is what we call very active, metabolic, hormonal fat, which can be really hard to shift.
Are there any particular tips for how to boost the metabolism and prevent this in menopause? Was it just like for any other time in your life? Exercise and blood sugar control? What?
The main thing really is to think about what you're eating, of course. Portion control. I know that sounds really boring, doesn't it? Because food's delicious and we all want to eat. But you can't eat as much as you did when you were 20, unfortunately. So I think you have to be mindful of what you're actually putting on your plate and how much. Do I really need to go back for seconds? We need to be more mindful when we eat. When you've eaten, wait before you go back for seconds, because a lot of the time, your body hasn't had chance to digest it and send the satiety hormone and tell you to stop eating. So portion control is a big thing. And then, as we spoke about earlier, really, looking at the amount of refined carbohydrates you eat. When I work with clients on weight management, it has a huge effect cutting down carbohydrates. And I'm not talking about, ketogenic diet. I'm talking about, getting your carbohydrates from vegetables predominantly. And eating protein keeps you fuller for longer. And then another key area for, reducing body fat and metabolism is keeping your muscle mass. We need to keep our muscles. They're very metabolic, our muscles. They need a lot of energy. So again, it goes back to lifting, strength training. So it's really a combination of many things, but looking at what you eat and eating whole foods and getting rid of all this processed, refined, high sugar foods is really, really key. And eating fats and protein keeps you full. It'll stop you snacking. It'll stop you craving things. And another area that I found quite useful, not for all clients, is to do like intermittent fasting, where you close your eating window. So you maybe, eat dinner and don't eat anything after 6, 7 o'clock at night, and then maybe have breakfast later. So you're expanding that amount of time where you're not eating, and it's actually a very effective way of weight management.
Yeah, a lot of people when they start doing that, they really love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's great. Okay, so we've got some questions that people have sent in that some you've I guess addressed partly. So one, are carbohydrates the worst for weight gain during menopause or not?
Yeah. There's so much about carbohydrates, aren't there now? There's people there's these totally anti-carbohydrates, and then there's a big span. And what I say is based on research, and carbohydrates are not inherently bad. There's nothing wrong with, we need carbohydrates. However, when you're going through menopause, if you are experiencing weight gain, then reducing carbohydrates can be beneficial. But like I said, it's the type of carbohydrate that you're eating. We want vegetables, we want, whole grains and all of those things, but really cutting down on the white carbohydrates can be really beneficial for weight management.
Because quite typically, the typical diet is extremely the most common, thing wrong with the diet, aside from processed foods and this sort of thing, is too much carbohydrate on the plate. But not everybody is eating like that. So if you are eating like that, then yeah, sure, reduce. So another question was about weight gain in menopause, but I think you just spoke about that. Someone else asked everything about testing. They wanted to know everything about testing. So you spoke about Dutch testing. Is there anything else you want to add from a testing? They did the comprehensive Dutch hormone test. You said sometimes stool tests.
Yeah, the DEXA scan, obviously for bone density, if you feel that is an area. Lipid profile to look at your blood lipids. Also, like nutrients. I do testing to look at the vitamin and mineral levels, to make sure that you're not deficient in anything. Because in perimenopause, because you're, you can all of a sudden have 2 periods a month, you can bleed quite heavily. A lot of ladies are actually suffering from iron deficiency. Vitamin D, again, you want to check those levels. B vitamins, really, really crucial for menopausal health, particularly like cognition. So having a blood test done to check nutrient levels is also very beneficial. But I think it's mainly the Dutch test, thyroid, DEXA scan, lipids, genetic testing. There's many different ones, and stool testing. No, we forgot that's I'm a big fan of stool testing.
Would you ever do serum tests? Like I know you do the Dutch test sometimes for the comprehensive, but a serum test for things like the AMH to look at ovarian reserve or the FSH, LH, progesterone, estrogen. Do you find those helpful?
Yeah, I don't tend to do those as much. It's predominantly the Dutch test because that just gives me so much information. But absolutely, depending on the different factors and the client, you can look at serum testing. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, because it can be, it often is more accessible or cheaper
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
the
it's
Dutch
that.
test.
Exactly. The Dutch test
Mm,
is very beneficial, but it can be quite expensive.
mm. Yeah. Sleep and perimenopause, what helps?
What helps? Yeah, great question. Okay, what I would say, first of all, as we spoke before, and this might sound really basic, but just get rid of technology. Even, okay, take it easy when you first do it. Don't think, oh, I'm going to turn everything off 3 hours before. Do it an hour before. Turn your phone off, turn your computer off, go and sit somewhere quiet, drink some chamomile tea, read a book, do some deep breathing, calm down. I think that's a big thing is that we go to bed when we're still all kind of overexcited and the brain is really active. So
Mm,
switch off technology. Um, Magnesium, as we spoke about, that can actually be magnesium glycinate can be very calming and helpful for sleep hygiene. Um, and it's really about, if you're suffering from a lot of hot flashes and night sweats, you really need to think about, okay, is my room well ventilated? You can actually buy like cooling pillows. You can buy these cooling blankets and they are actually wonderful. So there's a lot of things on the market that can be really helpful if you're suffering from night sweats, because that can really interrupt your sleep. And avoiding stimulants, caffeine, energy drinks, all of those things. Really, if you're having sleep issues, at least by midday, I would say to stop, using those things. Moving, exercising in the morning can be very beneficial for sleep. And just, I think, allowing yourself to go to bed. You don't have to stay up till 11, 12 o'clock. Try to go to bed earlier and just relax.
yeah.
And deep breathing, meditation,
Yeah.
yoga, all of those things are fantastic
Mm,
if you could do them.
yeah. Yeah. No, it can be really worthwhile to put aside the time, have a nice evening routine. You're going to function better the next day. If you've got work that you think you have to do, stop it, do it the next day. So you get a good sleep, so you're functioning the next day.
Mm.
I don't always follow my own advice, but it makes a big difference. I think someone asked any tips on dealing with fibroids, but that feels maybe a little bit out of the scope um, of the topic.
The fibroids, just to add something there, I mean,
Mm,
fibroids should, I'm not saying they will, but when you
mm,
come into menopause, they should shrink because fibroids actually love estrogen.
mm,
Perimenopause, you might estrogen dominance, but majority of women with fibroids find that they shrink when they come into menopause. And with that, the symptoms should likely to improve. But when you're in actually perimenopause, you could find with the hormonal fluctuations that you might have more symptoms of the fibroids.
so you can have hope for the future if
Absolutely.
if you've got fibroids.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Something that might get better, even if there are other things that go downhill. Okay, so I think you largely covered this too, perhaps how to prepare for perimenopause if you feel you're inching closer.
Yeah, I think knowledge is power, isn't it? Educate yourself. That's a big thing. Understand what is going on. Learn about the changes that happens. And like I said earlier, it's the majority of women that come to me when I say to them, have you ever thought that you maybe are in perimenopause? They never thought about that. They think, oh, I just thought it was to do with stress, or, you know, you've maybe got children at home, you've got parents that need more care. Life can become quite overwhelming when you're in your mid-40s, and you put it down to that rather than menopause or perimenopause. So I think educating yourself and understanding what's happening in your body gives you power. So that's a big thing. Healthy lifestyles we spoke about, really looking at your diet, movement daily, stress management, hydration. We haven't even spoke about that, but drinking, you know, something as simple as making sure you hydrate is really important. And then also building a support network. You know, don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, if you feel that you're coming into perimenopause, you know, build a support network. There's fantastic support networks out there that can really, really help you.
So someone asked, supplements mandatory for perimenopause phase, mainly around the hormone balance. Do you have anything?
Oh yeah, supplements is very, because I mean it's so individual, and I would always say, you know, when I talk about supplements, you need to really talk to a professional before you start taking supplements, because they can interact with medication. But when it comes to things like hormonal balance, that there are what you want, you need to look at the big picture. There's so many different supplements on the market. The ones that I would always look at for clients is vitamin D. Okay, that's in general, you know, that's not just specifically for hormonal balance. Omega-3 fatty acids is a really crucial, and B vitamins, because of the cognitive health and cognitive decline that we can experience. One interesting thing is red clover, which I'm sure everybody's heard about. And that, you know, has actually got quite a bit of research to back it up, that it can be beneficial towards menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, etc. So, you know, that, but these things you really need to be careful when you're taking them, because like I say, if you're taking other medications, you need to make sure that they don't react with them. I'm a big fan of ashwagandha, which I'm sure you are as well, Christa. I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
lots of people are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
because I've seen that work very well for clients that are suffering from stress and anxiety. And then coenzyme Q10 is good for heart health, good for energy. But like I say, it's very individual supplementation. But just if you're going, you know, if you're interested in supplements, make sure that you get a good quality supplement, because that really is, you know, it's all in the quality and the standard of the supplement that you buy.
Yeah. There's a huge difference in quality of
Yeah.
supplements. That's the thing. That's what that people often don't understand. And it's like, oh, this one's a lot cheaper, but it's full of rubbish.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes the cheap ones can be good. I will sometimes some products, it's like 100% vitamin C, 100% glutamine. I think that's fine, but you can get really messed up with things like B vitamins and some other things. Yeah. So we're now past 8 o'clock, so people probably need to get on. But I want to say I've seen that you do group programs as well as one-to-one consultations, and you've got a group program coming up soon, the 21-day reboot and reset for women over 40. Would you like to tell us something about that?
Yeah, thanks, Krista. I'm ever so excited about this program. I've been working on it for a year, and it's actually launched. Well, it's starting on the 24th of June. Can I just share my screen just for 1 minute, because I can
Yeah.
get this up here just so you can see what I'm talking about. Hold on. There we are. Can you see that? Yeah,
Yep.
so basically it's a complete 21-day program. So it's 3 weeks, and it's specifically, I mean, everything that we've spoken about really. It's working on rebooting and resetting, and working on energy, focus, you know, helping you feel great again. It's very structured. It has its own platform, its own app. And like I say, I'm ever so excited about doing it. the offer ends. Like what I've got on at the moment is a special introductory price, which is very, very low. That's about 40, it's about 650 krona for, I don't quite know where everyone is in the world that's listening. But that limited introductory price ends in 3 days. So the doors are actually closing. There's limited places left because I've had a fantastic response, which I'm really happy about. So if anybody is interested, then you just scan that QR code and that will take you to the page, and then you just click on that. So please, feel free, or if anyone has any questions or wants to email me or ask me anything about this, then do feel free. And then just one final thing here. I do have a wonderful Facebook group that's really, again, looking at all the things that we spoke about. With me being a beauty therapist, I do appreciate that we want to look good as well as we age. So we talk a lot about skin and hair and, everything to do with what happens when you're 40 plus. So again, you can just scan that if anyone's interested. But thank you so much for listening. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today, Christa.
Thank you so much for coming and letting me talk to you. And I will, when I send out the slides, and since there's only 3 days left on this, I'll try and get my act together and do it as soon as possible. But if anyone is there now watching, maybe take a screenshot with your phone of this in case I'm not quick enough. But I probably can send, even if I send a preliminary email out with this information. I do have a busy few days in the clinic. If I don't get to manage to do the email out with the link to the recording, I can send this only in advance, but I'll try and get it done. Okay, fantastic. I'll just check in the chat box because there wasn't any questions minutes ago. Just thank you for a great conversation. Oh, yeah, okay. She said I'm a naturopath and personal training, and it's already in menopause. I'm losing this message. She said her sleep's been a big issue for years, and she found that waking at night and taking Bach floral drops before bed along with melatonin is enough. And then there's like thank you and thank you.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Alison. And
Thank you.
it's been really great. And I will send the recording out to everybody. Some people have signed up and they were not able to listen, so then they can listen to that. Everyone else can re-listen if they want. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks again, Alison.
Oh,
And I hope to see you at my yoga one day.
I will absolutely. I feel guilty now. I'll be there. I promise. Now I've said it in front of everybody.
Okay, bye-bye then.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.